The human realm. Today, we will begin discussing the suffering in the three higher realms, starting with the human realm. Humans experience three fundamental types of suffering, along with the four great streams of suffering: birth, old age, sickness, and death. Additional human sufferings include the fear of meeting hated enemies, the fear of losing loved ones, the suffering of not getting what one wants, and the suffering of encountering what one does not want. The three fundamental types of suffering. Generally, the three fundamental types of suffering are present in all six realms. However, human beings have more explicit feelings about them, which is why they are discussed in the section on suffering in the human realm. In the course of this study, we should carefully contemplate suffering in the human realm. After all, we cannot directly experience the sufferings of hell beings, pretas, and animals, so our understanding of their suffering is only approximate. The sufferings of humans are ever present, leading us all to have some personal familiarity with them. Of course, this will be a different matter if you have never contemplated them. However, if you reflect on these sufferings, you will come to realize that the Buddha's statements, such as all phenomena are impermanent and all contaminated phenomena are suffering, hold true. Therefore, regular contemplation is very important. You should not just quickly go through the literal meaning of the text during the group ngondro practice. Although the text itself is simple enough that those who have a basic understanding of the doctrines and special terms should understand it well, contemplating it and putting it into real practice is not so easy. It is similar to this. While it may be easy to read one or two books, integrating their content into your mind so that it arises naturally and can be applied in real life is much more challenging. That's why past eminent masters repeatedly emphasized, it is easy to study the Dharma, but hard to practice it. In fact, the three fundamental types of suffering that we'll soon discuss are not hard to find in our daily lives. The Lotus Sutra states, "But because of the three sufferings, world-honored one, in the midst of birth and death we undergo burning anxieties, delusions, and ignorance, delighting in and clinging to lesser doctrines. Because of the suffering of change, the suffering upon suffering, and the suffering of everything composite, we living beings have to endure excruciating torments in samsara." How do we uproot the three fundamental types of suffering? We can only rely on the Dharma nectar. In general, people seek to attain good fortune and avoid misfortune, evade pain, and pursue happiness. For this reason, some seek a panacea, some pursue wealth, some chase romance, and some strive for status, while the only thing that can truly make us happy is the Dharma. When the Dharma merges with our minds, we can certainly eliminate all suffering. It is like a severely ill patient who must rely on a good doctor to alleviate all his pains. Because of this, I truly want to spread the Dharma to everyone's mind. Those who possess faith, wisdom, and virtuous roots recognize that Dharma is indispensable as it offers a remedy for the three fundamental types of suffering for human beings. The Infinite Life Sutra states, "The medicine of Dharma can treat the three sufferings." We often say things like, "All living beings suffer," and "It's hard to live in this world." Indeed, upon careful examination, we realize that life is perpetually filled with suffering that can ultimately ruin our happiness, comfort, and joy. So, who are the happiest people in the world? It may not be those with wealth or status. It is true practitioners who have reached a state of letting go, releasing attachment, and being carefree. This is not mere self-praise as Buddhists. It is supported by many historical accounts and practitioners' personal experiences. In today's world, to eliminate the deep suffering in our minds, Dharma is the essential and invaluable remedy. That said, Since you have generated bodhicitta, you should not ignore those around you and enjoy the Dharma alone. Once you possess capacity, wisdom, and compassion, you should share the Dharma with sentient beings who have an affinity with you. Of course, the propagation of Dharma cannot be achieved quickly. If you are not sufficiently mature as a practitioner, but hastily rush to a city to benefit beings, you may easily be influenced by the external environment. As a result, not only will you fail to benefit others, but you may also become trapped yourself. Therefore, in our practice, we should aspire to benefit others while also protecting ourselves. Today is March 8th, International Women's Day, and may all female Dharma friends perfect your practice, have no hindrances, be carefree, auspicious, and happy. Meanwhile, I have sent some gifts to the female teachers at the Wisdom and Compassion School. Initially, I had wanted to give special candies to the female practitioners at Larungar, but somehow I forgot. Perhaps this happens because you did not perform the yellow Jambala practice. But no worries, as I pray to the Guru and the three jewels from the bottom of my heart, wishing they bless each and every one of you to attain genuine happiness. In an article I wrote in my book Footprints on the Journey, I mentioned that Women's Day is widely recognized internationally. Although we are monastics who forego all worldly holidays and festivals, it's still necessary to join the worldly people to celebrate certain holidays. The suffering of change. The suffering of change refers to the suffering we experience when a state of happiness suddenly changes into suffering. One moment we are healthy, and then without warning, we may catch a cold and have a runny nose. One moment we feel content and satisfied after enjoying a good meal, but the next, we are overcome by intense spasms caused by parasites in our stomach. I had such an experience when I was a teenager. At that time, I had not yet attended school. Once while herding yaks, I experienced a sudden violent spasm in my stomach, and I almost died. Fortunately, several young shepherds nearby noticed me and helped save my life. This is the suffering of change, which demonstrates that no worldly happiness is reliable. The Sutra on the Causes and Conditions of the Golden Youth tells a story about the suffering of change. A merchant named Delicate Ear possessed wealth that was unmatched. He was as wealthy as Vaishravana, the guardian king of the north. Then he had a baby boy who bore 18 marks of ugliness. A cascade of misfortunes plagued his family. His house suddenly caught fire, and all his possessions were lost. The merchant and his family, who once lived blissfully like celestial beings, were reduced to beggars and forced to endure a very miserable existence. The suffering of change can often be observed in our daily lives as well. A few days ago, I encountered a woman who had endured great hardship. Her house caught fire several years ago, and her husband was imprisoned. Over the past few years, she has had no choice but to live a vagabond life with her children. Since her children have nowhere to attend school, she asked me if they could study at the Wisdom and Compassion School, to which I agreed. The suffering of change affects many of us. Initially, a person may have a loving family, youth, wealth, and intelligence, but suddenly everything can shift. Therefore, after studying the Dharma, we should understand that the suffering of change can happen to anyone, including ourselves. As stated in a comprehensive commentary on the Heart Sutra, all happiness in the world will inevitably change and come to an end. When conditions arise, entanglements and afflictions appear, hence, they are referred to as the suffering of change. Many celebrities and millionaires who once wielded great power and prestige have ultimately left the world in a very miserable state. Thus, no one can escape the suffering of change. Currently, many of us enjoy good health, a happy family, and a fulfilling Dharma practice. Nevertheless, we are living in contaminated samsara. and everything we possess will eventually be lost. As a Vajra song says, beauty is like summer flowers, and wealth is like autumn clouds. Therefore, however wonderful something may seem, it cannot withstand the forces of nature and the passage of time. Eventually, it will be reduced to nothing. Of course, Mahayanists can understand and accept setbacks and changes. However, a person who has not studied the Dharma often feels a sense of unfairness. Life is unfair to him. Society is unfair to him. So all he does is complain to others. In fact, life is filled with the suffering of change. One moment we are happy, but the next we are plunged into suffering. An enemy may steal our wealth or livestock. A fire might destroy our home. Sudden illness or harmful forces may strike us, or we may receive devastating news. For example, on May 12, 2008, everything was normal at 1427 in Wenchuan County, Sichuan Province. But at 1428, everything changed. A massive and devastating earthquake struck, claiming the lives of more than 69,000 people, leaving over 18,000 missing, and leaving at least 4.8 million homeless. The earthquake brought catastrophic changes to countless lives. It is clear from the above that human life is extremely fragile, and our bodies and sensations are unreliable. In truth, any comfort, happiness, or prestige found within samsara is entirely devoid of permanence or stability. Ultimately, none of it can withstand the inevitable cycle of suffering. Therefore, we should cultivate a sense of disenchantment with it all. It is stated in a Vajra song, "Happiness is as fragile and subtle as a strand of hair. No one knows when it will break." The Sutra of the Right Mindfulness of Dharma says, "In life and death, there are many faults and worries. Nothing is solid or permanent. Everything changes and crumbles easily. Therefore, pains and difficulties are overwhelming, while peace and happiness are scarce in samsara. Even if there is occasional happiness, it is fragile and can quickly turn into suffering." In 2008, a global financial crisis erupted, bringing ruin to many formerly well-off individuals in both the West and the East. For example, Adolf Merkel, then the 5th richest man in Germany and 94th on Forbes' World's Billionaires list, had amassed a fortune of $9.2 billion. However, due to poor investments compounded by the global financial turmoil, Merkel's business empire collapsed, and he committed suicide by throwing himself under a speeding train. Additionally, Patrick Rocca, an Irish property tycoon who once held a fortune of 500 million euros, took his own life with a self-inflicted gunshot in his mansion. His action followed a massive downturn in the stock market, which led to the collapse of the third largest bank in Ireland. There are many similar incidents occurring around the world. During the financial crisis, numerous wealthy and powerful individuals went bankrupt in a matter of months, and their lives were abruptly transformed. Those who have never studied the Dharma and do not understand the truth of samsara may feel it is the end of the world when they encounter misfortune, while those with some Dharma practice will not share the same response. Therefore, we practitioners should contemplate these teachings daily and truly recognize the sufferings in the human realm through the analogies and examples presented in the text. If we can develop the conviction that all things in this world are suffering and that no happiness is permanent, we will cease to long for permanence and will generate disenchantment and aversion towards samsara. In this way, our practice is bound to be successful. Otherwise, if we remain unaware of the truth of samsara, it becomes meaningless for us to protect, pamper, and praise our image as practitioners while using seemingly profound Dharma jargon. Dharma practice is about transforming our minds in every possible way. It is only when we develop a deep renunciation of samsara, when we no longer wish to remain in it for even a moment, much like a patient with gallbladder disease detests greasy food, or a prisoner loathes their dark cell, that our practice can achieve complete success. The 400 stanzas on the middle way states, "When there is no end at all to this ocean of suffering, why are you childish people not afraid of drowning in it?" Samsara is a boundless ocean of suffering in which ignorant beings are trapped. These beings perceive suffering as happiness, filthy manure as a delicacy, and remain blind to the samsaric reality of all phenomena. Consequently, they feel no aversion towards samsara. In our society, many people's actions are completely meaningless. Life is so short, yet individuals fully devote themselves to the pursuit of wealth and fame. But what did they truly gain in the end? Reflecting on this can inspire many. If we present a bright and joyful path to liberation, they may think we are mentally ill and question our motives. Unfortunately, there is little we can do for certain individuals. Nevertheless, those willing to pursue the Dharma should carefully contemplate the suffering of samsara and cultivate conviction through sustained practice. By doing so, many practical states, including the supreme tantric states, will naturally arise in their minds. Otherwise, except for a very few practitioners with superior faculties, it is extremely challenging for an ordinary individual to attain realization without following the proper sequence of practice. The suffering upon suffering. We experience suffering upon suffering, and before one suffering is over, we are subjected to another. We contract leprosy, then develop boils. As if that were not enough, we then suffer an injury. Our father dies, and soon after, our mother passes away. We are pursued by enemies, and on top of that, we lose a loved one. The cycle continues. There was once a news report about a family in northeast China that faced a series of misfortunes. The child in the family was killed by a van on his way home from school. The father attempted to save his son by stopping a car for help, but was struck by the vehicle, which left his leg broken. The mother could not bear the loss and became mentally disoriented. The grandmother suffered a stroke upon hearing the news and was taken to a hospital. People remarked that this family was extremely unfortunate. Perhaps these misfortunes were the karmic consequences of their actions in this life or in previous ones. There is a story about Marvel Bhikkhuni in the Sutra of the Wise and the Foolish. Many misfortunes befell Marvel Bhikkhuni when she was still a layperson. Once, while pregnant, she decided to return to her parents' home with her husband and son to give birth. One night during the journey, they spent the night under a large tree. At midnight, she went into labor, and a significant amount of discharge came from her body, which attracted a venomous snake. Her husband was bitten and killed by the snake. The next morning, she moved close to her husband and held his hand, only to realize he was dead. Overcome with grief, she lost consciousness. Seeing this, her older son began to cry loudly, which gradually roused her. She had no choice but to leave her husband's corpse behind and continue the journey with her older son on her shoulder and her younger son in her arms. On the way, she encountered a wide and deep river. She left her older son on the bank, crossed the river with her newborn in her arms, and then returned for her older son. Seeing her, the older son stepped into the river and waded toward her, but was swept away by the strong current. She attempted to save him, but was unable to do so. She had no choice but to witness him being carried away. Devastated, she returned to the other bank in search of her newborn, only to find that he had been eaten by a wolf, with blood and body parts left on the ground. She fainted once more and regained consciousness only after a long while. She continued her journey and encountered a Brahmin who was a friend of her father. The Brahmin told her, "Your parents' house caught fire recently, and the whole family was burned to death." Most of us have not experienced as many misfortunes as she did, but we can still encounter suffering upon suffering in our daily lives. For example, a person may catch a cold while someone is speaking ill of them. Meanwhile, their most precious object may be missing, and they may have a hard time traveling to work, and so forth. After experiencing these mishaps, some people may feel unlucky, but in reality, it is nothing out of the ordinary because that is just how life is. If we understand the nature of suffering, it becomes easier for us to face it. In his commentary on the Vimalakirti Sutra, Master Huiwan of the Sui dynasty defined suffering upon suffering as follows. Suffering arises from another suffering, thus it is called suffering upon suffering. Thus, suffering adds to suffering, thus it is called suffering upon suffering. As we often say, misfortunes never come alone. A person entangled in the effects of multiple karmas must endure several misfortunes, with new suffering building upon previous suffering, resulting in suffering upon suffering. We should not only understand suffering in the human realm literally, but also truly feel it through meditation. Regardless of where we are reborn in samsara, our existence is filled with one suffering after another, leaving no opportunity for even a moment of happiness. In this context, we should pray to the Guru and the Three Jewels, vowing to take on the suffering of all living beings. As stated in Gyaltse Tokme Zongpo's commentary on the 7 points of training the mind, when we experience suffering, we should think, "May the suffering of all living beings be taken by me. With this merit, may the suffering of all living beings be eliminated." This practice is the best way to transform suffering into the path of enlightenment. The suffering of everything composite. Some of us may feel that life is going smoothly right now and that we are not experiencing much suffering. However, in reality, we are deeply immersed in the causes of suffering. The food we eat, the clothes we wear, our homes, and even the pleasures we derive from adornments and celebrations are all rooted in harmful actions. Since so much of what we do is built upon negative actions, it can only result in suffering. The definition of the suffering of everything composite varies across Buddhist scriptures, including the treasury of Abhidharma and the precious garland of the middle way. Generally, according to the Mahayana perspective, the suffering of everything composite refers to change. That is, as long as something is changing, it is inherently suffering. The introduction to the middle way states, "Beings are like the moon in rippling water, fitful, fleeting, empty in their nature. Bodhisattvas see them thus and yearn to set them free." The commentary on the 400 stanzas on the middle way and the root stanzas of the middle way also explain something similar to this verse. In general, it is difficult to recognize that we are experiencing the suffering of everything composite. In the great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment, Lama Tsongkhapa elucidates the suffering of everything composite through an analogy. He said it is like having a sore that has not been touched. There may be no pain at the moment, but as long as it is there, the suffering can arise at any time. Therefore, although the suffering of everything composite may not yet be apparent, it always exists in a hidden form. Some sutras state that birth, old age, and death correspond to the 3 fundamental types of suffering. Birth represents the suffering of everything composite. Old age corresponds to the suffering of change, and death embodies the suffering upon suffering. You should frequently reflect on this throughout your practice to cultivate a conviction that the nature of samsara is suffering. Some people argue, who says everything in samsara is suffering? I'm very happy now. As you can see, I have money, status, and no pains. However, such happiness lasts at most a day or two. Can you guarantee that you will always be this happy? Have you always been this happy since childhood? The answer is a definite no. In fact, if we compare the suffering and happiness in our lives, except for a very few enlightened practitioners, most of us experience much more suffering than happiness. Next, let's take tea and sampa as examples to further illustrate the suffering of everything composite. In regions of China where tea is cultivated, countless small creatures are killed during the planting, harvesting of leaves, and other related activities. When I visited cities in Yunnan province and Hangzhou, I noticed tea farmers spraying pesticides on tea trees, which killed innumerable insects on the tea leaves. Recently, a Korean told me, the good quality tea leaves will not be put on the market for sale. What you bought is of low quality, so you would better not drink it anymore. If you want to drink tea, I will offer you some good ones. This is true to a certain extent. I have been told that tea farmers keep the good quality tea leaves for their own consumption, while poor quality leaves are sold. 1-year aged pu'er tea is labeled as 1,000-year aged tea, commanding a higher price. Tea is indispensable to Tibetans in our daily lives. When Venerable Atisha arrived in Tibet, the Tibetans welcomed him with a cup of tea. Atisha first offered the tea to all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, then began to drink it. He truly enjoyed the tea, exclaiming, "Tibetans are blessed to have such great tea to drink. We do not have this kind of tea in India. It not only quenches thirst, but also improves wisdom, strengthens the body, relieves drowsiness, fosters virtuous actions," and so forth. Had Indians had this tea, I would have been willing to exchange it for gold. Therefore, we should emulate Atisha and drink tea whenever we have the chance. The audience laughs. However, what Patrul Rinpoche wanted to convey is that tea is associated with various forms of suffering. During Patrul Rinpoche's time, tea was transported to Dart Sado by porters, each carrying 12 6-brick packs. The weight rested on a band around their foreheads, which eventually wore away their skin. Even when their skulls became visible, pale and exposed, they persisted in their labor. Additionally, there were often robbers and wild animals in the forests of Mount Erlang, so tea merchants rarely passed through the area without incident. The social conditions of that time can be seen in the historical accounts of Master Phazon and Tolku Gangkar Rinpoche. From Dotak onward, the burden shifts to yaks and mules, whose bodies endure relentless strain. Their backs are bent under heavy loads, their bellies marred with cuts and abrasions, and their hair worn away from constant friction. They suffer immensely in their servitude. Many senior Tibetans still recall how difficult it was to bring tea to the Tibetan areas. Some of them even personally experienced the hardships of carrying tea. Obtaining a brick of tea back then was no easy feat, and it involved tremendous effort and pain. In comparison, road infrastructure and transportation vehicles are much more developed now. But does that mean there are fewer negative actions involved? The answer is no. People do not necessarily commit fewer misdeeds in tea plantations and trade. It is just that some steps are skipped. Carrying tea entails immeasurable suffering for both porters and animals. Additionally, trading the tea is nothing more than a cycle of broken promises, deceit, and disputes until the tea ultimately changes hands. Some entrepreneurs who are also lay practitioners find it difficult to conduct business without resorting to dishonesty. And if their business fails, they struggle to make a living. This has troubled them for a long time. Their experiences highlight the conflict between the law of karma in Buddhism and the means of earning a livelihood in mundane life. Finding a win-win solution is challenging. I can only suggest that you strive for honesty as much as possible. Tibetans traditionally drank brick tea, a type of black tea, but they are now beginning to explore other varieties such as pu'er tea, Longchen tea, and jasmine tea, the production of which often involves negative actions. Therefore, when we enjoy a cup of tea, savoring its fragrance and soothing taste, we should also recognize that it is not beyond the nature of suffering. Of course, this detailed analysis is not intended to deter you from eating or drinking. Rather, it aims to help you understand that all forms of happiness are accompanied by countless sufferings or may lead to future suffering. In fact, all conditioned phenomena are inseparable from constant change, which is, in itself, the suffering of everything composite. The commentary on the Heart Sutra states, all conditioned things have the nature of suffering. They are always changing, compelled, and unreliable. Thus, it is referred to as the suffering of everything composite. You may feel joy while sipping a cup of tea, but the tea itself embodies the nature of suffering due to its association with many negative actions. You may feel content after a meal, yet it still involves the suffering of everything composite, as expressed in a poem. Hoeing the crops in the midday sun, sweat drips to the soil. Who knows that of our meal in the dish, every grain comes after hard toil. This poem may not resonate with you if you have never visited a food processing facility or a farmer's market. You may even think everything is taintless and idyllic. Once you become aware of the realities surrounding food, your perception may change significantly. The reason our practice is ineffective is that we rarely reflect on these matters. For example, while living in a house, have we ever considered what brought the house into existence? When using the donations of the faithful, have we thought about whether we have done anything beneficial for living beings? When feeling happy about dressing up in stylish dresses of various colors, white, red, black, green, multicolored, or black and white, have we ever contemplated what goes into making the dresses? When having a meal, even the simplest one, have we wondered where the rice and the fuel came from? In fact, these reflections are part of our practice. If we can engage in this contemplation often, we are becoming good practitioners. Therefore, we should reflect on, as much as possible, whatever we think and do. Otherwise, if we behave like mentally disoriented individuals who only care about themselves, without ever reflecting on the past, present, and future, it will not benefit our practice in any way. We just learned that carrying and bartering tea involves the suffering of everything composite. Does this mean there is no other suffering involved in the process of making tea? The answer is no. In the Tibetan region, tea was typically exchanged for animal products like wool and lambskins, which also entailed many negative actions. Before shearing in the summer, wool is infested with fleas, ticks, and countless other tiny creatures as numerous as the strands of wool themselves. During the shearing process, many of these insects are either decapitated, sliced in half, or disemboweled. Those that survive become trapped in the wool and eventually suffocate. Such actions inevitably result in rebirths in the lower realms. Regarding lambskins, it is important to remember that newborn lambs possess fully developed senses, allowing them to experience pleasure and pain. Just as they begin to enjoy their first moments of life in perfect health, they are killed. While they may be considered simple creatures, they still cling to life and do not wish to die. They feel love for life and suffer greatly when tortured and slaughtered. Meanwhile, the ewes, who lose their lambs, exemplify a mother's anguish at losing her only child. With this in mind, even the act of enjoying a single sip of tea cannot escape contributing to the conditions for rebirth in the lower realms. Therefore, sipping a mouthful of tea is not as simple as it may seem. Modern people use money, instead of wool or lambskins, to exchange for tea. But how do you acquire that money? We should analyze and contemplate this from various perspectives.